Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how you doing? You okay?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just excited to finally address the real Robocop. Not these fake ones, but the real one, the one that all true fans recognize as the only real legitimate versions of Robocop.
Robocop Core, that's what this is.
Yes.
It's stripped down to its essence. Yes. Yes, this we are going to be addressing the 1988 animated series. Animated is probably a bit of a stretch, but yes, it is animated in an 80s fashion. But this is only lasted 12 episodes. And as you sort of note, 1988 came out the year after the first show. And kind of, I don't know, it obviously predates 3, but it kind of shows that trajectory early on of where certain people wanted the show or the property to go. I think there are elements in this series that are replicated in 3, but let's talk about it. Yeah, so 12 episodes. How many of the episodes did you get to watch? I only watched 3 of them.
Yeah, I watched about 3 all the way through, and then I fell asleep, drifting in and out of consciousness watching several others.
Like a fever dream.
Yeah, I had very strange dreams. I was encased in a block of metal and slaughtering various people with laser guns.
With laser guns. That's it. It should be noted. This is, I think I can't say for sure. The animation looks very similar to a number of 80s cartoons. In particular, I had notes from the real Ghostbusters. So I know this is not an American animation studio. This is probably going to be one of the sort of either the Korean or one of the South Asian animation studios that did this at the time, I think. But it's
there's a story here, and that's that Marvel Productions made this show. So for me, It reminds me very much of like the Spider-Man show from the time, and Spider-Man and his amazing friends, and it's sort of like going back to like an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon, and you're like, oh, I recognize this style. It feels like home, even though I haven't seen this particular show before.
Yes.
So for me, I kind of have a little bit of nostalgia for just the style. And obviously, Marvel abridged the episode order for reasons we will probably discuss.
Yes. The other thing we should note, because this is important, actually, you make a good point about it being Marvel, because Marvel, not only did they do this, they did a comic book adaptation of the first film.
And continuation. My brother and I read it.
Yeah.
And it was not great.
No, I saw little bits on pieces online as I was going through this, and I was just like, wow, like, and I'm a fan of, I'm a fan of novelizations. I'm always a fan of sort of adaptations and novelizations, and I've got a couple of those. I have the Buckaroo Banzai Marvel comic adaptation, and there's Raiders of the Lost Ark because they continued the Indiana Jones adventures and so on and so forth. They did a lot in that period.
The Indiana Jones ones aren't bad.
No, they're pretty good.
Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, they're actually pretty good. And obviously Marvel did Star Wars and have done again. So this
Star
is their
Trek
sort of,
for a little while too.
Yeah, so this is their wheelhouse. They've done this kind of thing. And this cartoon definitely feels like, an extension of those kind of properties, looking to do the a reflection of the comics rather than whatever was on screen.
Well, and there was a toy line.
Yes.
Yeah. called RoboCop and the Ultra Police,
which
which we'll get to when we discuss the final episode.
episode 12.
But the toy line was clearly not correlated to the animated series. So, unlike all of the franchises that we know and love that have very tight correlations there,
Yeah.
this was sort of like, no, we made this movie. We're going to license it to these individual people, and they're not going to talk to each other.
Yeah, it's a little all over the place. But I mean, what are your thoughts then on this concept? I mean, there's a couple of things I wanted sort of like to highlight, but in this idea, I mean, it's the 80s for a start. Like we sort of laughed about it, we've joked about it previously, but this thing of taking an adult property and then making it like toyetic and a sort of kid friendly and all sort of stuff, like it feels like the kind of thing that would happen in the RoboCop universe. Like,
Yes. Well, it was the Reagan years, so
yes,
the Reagan years were 5 degrees off of RoboCop 1. To be fair,
yeah. So it feels appropriate because I mean, we said like this wasn't the only one. There was Rambo and the Freedom Force. Beetlejuice got turned into an animated series. Police Academy. There was Chuck Norris and the Karate Commandos. Yeah, all these kind of ones sort of ended up, Highlander ended up as an animated series. That was more in the 90s, but yeah, they sort of take these sort of adult focused properties and sort of turn them into kid friendly versions. But
fascism for kids, it really is a shame that Starship Troopers was too late. I mean, I can see like collect your proof of purchase seals to get your citizenship badge. Like, frightening stuff would have come out of that.
Please don't give the American government any actual ideas, because that's clearly on the horizon. No, it's the way that this is structured though that was I thought was interesting in sort of, I would say kidifying it, but sort of introducing it as a kid's property. You said laser gun. It's all lasers. There are no bullets. It's all laser guns. It is Alex Murphy, but it kind of it's kind of toned down about how much is in the suit. It almost suggests that he was killed, but he's still in there, rather than in the film. Obviously, it's a brain and a face and some of the bits and pieces. Like in the end,
I mean, they do say it's Murphy, right? Like the introduction says he was killed and he was,
yes,
sort of. So any kind of ambiguity that he's really human is sort of lost. Although there are a few lines of dialogue where he says, like, they say like Anne says like you're a cop, you're a human inside, and he says like, am I? I was like, oh, that's it's quite good. I don't know. I the violence is certainly toned down, right? It's very cartoon, violence of the era.
He gets his own robocar.
That is true. But and he gets a robocopter in the finale.
A robocopter, yes. We get to meet the Ultra Police. Ed 209, but it appears. I watched the opening episode, but it's at Ed 260.
I love it.
That was my favorite part. Was it starts shooting up the street, and it's being used as a traffic enforcement device. I thought that felt the closest to like the source material, and I was like, oh, that's kind of clever. That's funny.
I love that sequence. They've retrofitted an ED 209, given it a new designation, and it's got traffic lights on it.
Yeah.
And so somebody does an illegal U-turn and it opens fire, and then other cars kind of park because they're alarmed at the violence on the streets, and he says, you're illegally parked, and opens fire on them and says, your car is subject to towing.
Your car.
That's quite a clever bit. I thought I was really pleased by that.
Yeah, and that's it. I think every now and then, this from what I saw, this cartoon sort of like skims that sort of thing. And in the 80s, you could do that, I think, in the cartoons, but it kind of skims that idea. There's a few times when they do have like those. I'm haunted by his hauntings, like the fact he still is having flashbacks of his wife and son. Yes, it's all there. But like, there are several times in some of the episodes I watched where like Lois will call him out and be like, "You can't kill these people." Like, like back off. And he's like, "No, no, I will." And we'll get to where it happens in the final episode. Um, but again, like OCP has become sort of much like as in the TV show is now a big part of everything, but in a kind of benevolent kind of way. They're kind of like just an entity that exists, but then every now and then they'll be like, "Oh no, no, this is we will do something nefarious,"
Mhm.
but they're not as corrupt as they have been. Um, yeah,
One thing
it's a weird setup.
I really enjoyed this first cartoon. I wouldn't say it's good, but I mean, I compared to RoboCop 3, compared to
Hmm.
the RoboCop live action show, compared to, Alpha Commandos, which we'll discuss next, I thought this was, after RoboCop 1 and 2, my favorite RoboCop thing, which admittedly, uh, the bar, we'll talk about the reboot and, maybe that'll beat it. But admittedly, the bar is low there. But I
Yeah,
thought this kind
yeah.
of most keeps the tone of those first two films. And I think it's because it's so early. And I think a big part of it is that it looks right. Now they've
Hmm.
given RoboCop a sort of cyclopean eye, sort of like a Cylon, an
Yeah.
old school Cylon. But for the most part, like he looks right. It's, Anne Lewis. She looks basically right. They've introduced a new police it's not clear what his rank is from what I saw, but who's sort of anti-RoboCop to go along with
Oh
the
no,
the
no,
block the
they
block
haven't
captain.
introduced him. No, no, no. He's
Is
in
he
the
from the
movie.
he's in the movie? Okay.
He's the SWAT guy from the film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I mean it feels very much in line with that first movie. I
yeah.
mean, RoboCop, I mean it looks basically like Peter Weller. It looks closer to Peter Weller than other
Actors
versions.
do. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's Anne Lewis. She hasn't been magically replaced with somebody else. It's even got Boddicker and, the ED-209, and it feels the OCP symbol is the same. I mean, it feels, yeah, they've turned it into, G.I. Joe or Cops or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I was pleased with the kind of like look and feel.
Hmm.
Um, that it just feels more right to me than other versions.
No, I have to say, one of the things I was kind of surprised about was, oh, you said that the ED-209 sort of sequence, but also in the I think the opening episode,
Mhm.
Robocop takes his helmet off, and it looks like a flesh skin over a thing. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, they have not like drawn back. Like it looks like it's got pipes and stuff. It's got things holding it in place. Like I was like, oh wow, like they're not messing. This is still looks kind of like weird and
Yeah, it's a little simplified, but it still conveys that sense of
yeah,
horror and, of not living flesh, right?
yeah. This introduces elements though that we didn't have in the film.
Mhm.
Not just the toyetic elements, but also like there's a character that is like maintains him. There's a woman who
Mm.
is like a woman scientist who's all she doesn't see him as a person. She just sees him as being like the perfect machine. And so there's sort of tensions there between her and Lois. And Lois is like, no, this is Murphy. He's my partner. He's got a soul. And she's like, no, no, no. He's a machine. And it's all about how she can improve his reflexes or his other bits and pieces,
Processing.
processing
Yeah.
speed and that sort of thing. So I like that actually. That one of the things we said that there wasn't a creator character in that first film, but this introduces that kind of element to create that tension of is it man or machine, which I actually think, as you say, sort of comes up a few times and works really well.
And there's that same character in 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
Except that, both times she's a woman, just as
Hmm.
she is here. Except in 2 and 3, she is, she's a different character between those two. But in 2 and 3, she is sympathetic to RoboCop, and
Yeah.
she's another pro RoboCop like Lewis is.
Yeah.
Here she's playing the opposite role, and I thought that was interesting.
Mm.
It allows for different storylines.
Yeah, I like that tension existing. Talking about his cyclopic his vision, and this is something I was curious about because I'd never thought about this. I always thought like the helmet is just a helmet, and he gets to see through a small like visor. So I've always taken it that when you see the targeting and his directives, that's actually in his vision. Like he can do that with or without his helmet on. The cartoon, because of the way it's set up, suggests that actually that heads-up display is actually a part of the helmet, and this happens in the other one as well. But it was kind of clear from the outset that they've actually said, "Oh no, this is actually a part of the helmet display, not a part of his vision." And I thought that was interesting that they've distanced that from being in his head to being an external thing he looks at.
Yeah, and that kind of brought up for me the fact that when we see RoboCop's point of view, it's sort of digitized. It sort of has that VHS style effect that they did manually for the first film.
Mm.
Um, and that continues, when we have the heads-up display, the overlay on it.
Yeah.
But that sort of makes me wonder, is he seeing with his eyes? Are those eyes, even in the live action movies, are those eyes just decoration? And some
Mm.
video input is actually being streamed into his cerebral cortex? I don't know. But for whatever reason, I'm not sure they chose this as a commentary on,
No.
the first film, but I'm sure they chose it for aesthetic reasons. But
I think it makes it easier for the cartoon because it means that they actually use it in both cartoons actually, but they use it in this as well to have like almost like a plug-in to be like, we're uploading information for you that you can then see as part of your head-up
mhm.
display. And I think it works. It works as a cartoon. It works and it works fine. But I've always taken it as you. Like, I've always thought like it's in his head. Like his eyes aren't really his eyes. They're a camera in technology that actually is
Mm.
plugged into his brain. Couple of things. This is obviously more super heroic, and he's now
Yes.
massive. Like it's clear he's like seven. Even Stephen claimed he's like 7 foot tall.
Yes.
And
This is what if we did cast Arnie?
yes, oh yeah, very much so. Um, did you watch the second episode? Because there was something I laughed. I
Yeah.
literally like laughed out loud at sort of how ridiculous the moment was. The episode called the is it the Scrambler?
Scrambler, yeah.
Scrambler, and he breaks out of prison. But what he's managed to do is before the internet, he's managed to hack into OCP's computer from prison
Uh-huh.
and just happens to come across a password for Robocop. That's the password is perfect.
Yes.
And he then uses it to whilst Robo is sleeping to
Take control of him
yeah, take
and make
control of
him
him.
commit crimes.
Yeah,
Right, which we've never seen on any animated show before.
no,
You
yeah.
know.
But I love the fact that like the first thing he does, he uses him to break him out of prison.
Hmm.
And the way it works is he turns up in the Robo police car, smashes through a wall, and then they leave. And the guy says, "Thank you, Robocop," and gives him his car, and then they leave. And then Robocop wakes up the next morning, and everyone's like, "Where have you been?" And he's like, "I've been here." Because he's been was unconscious, and then they say, "Well, someone broke someone out of prison," and they described it as a 7 foot giant.
Yeah.
Eyewitnesses described it as a 7 foot giant. Not it was Robocop in his car that
In
turned
his
up.
car. Yeah.
And that like I was like, I know this is a cartoon, I know it's silly, but like, come on, like,
Yeah, I mean, as a fan of, 80s JoJo and Transformers cartoons, you have to be very forgiving of a lot of
yeah,
stuff like exactly like that. Um, so I tend to be forgiving of that. And then the next sequence is RoboCop robbing a bank,
yeah,
a sort of zombie state, which is, I mean, it's entertaining. It
yeah,
is what it is. It's a cartoon episode from the 80s. I mean,
yeah. And it's fine. It's as you say, it's standard fare for these kind of cartoons. I'm sure this is the kind of thing. And I think one of the things it made me realize how, but I hadn't watched this as a kid. And so this I'm coming to this kind of. I know I've seen images from it and clips from it and stuff, but this is the first time I sat and watched episodes. And you have to sort of go in with these certain eyes and stuff. And you do when you go back and watch these 80s cartoons, and you have to have you lift that sort of nostalgia, the rose tinted glasses, and you do
The
go,
veil.
yeah, and you sort of go, oh, the animation's a bit crap, and the storylines make no sense, and actually this episode's kind of irritating, and this doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and all of a sudden you're going, oh, I can't watch like Thundercats ever again because it's horrendous, and you go, okay, I shouldn't have done that. I think you're right.
Thundercats is a mess. Yeah.
Yes, it is. One day, if they ever make it as a film, eventually properly, you might get around to that. But I recognise it with I'm a massive fan of like the real Ghostbusters, and I acknowledge that there are episodes that you do sort of have to scratch your head out, and you're like, this makes no sense at all. But I'm gonna ride it through. And you're right, you have to sort of give it that MacGuffin or that sort of roll out on those kind of things.
I mean, I think that a lot of times going back to those shows, they start with an idea, right? Sometimes the idea is crap, but oftentimes the idea is a good idea, right? Like, somebody takes control of Robocop and, instead of having, say, a Spider-Man duplicate, somebody puts on the costume and commits crimes. This is actually, we can have somebody take control of Robocop and hijack him. That's not a bad sort of twist on, that sort of classic superhero trope. And it's cool seeing Robocop rob a bank and do bad stuff for an episode. The writing as far as justifying it and making all of the connective tissue of the plot make sense is never as important, right?
No.
I mean, I'm reminded of like a G.I. Joe episode where Cobra, to raise money, organizes a telethon. Who's paying? Go like who's like that's a cool idea, and a lot of people love that episode. I mean, but there was in these cartoons, like, and even in comics of that era, there is this kind of like cool idea, never properly executed, but sort of gonzo great ideas that just sort of need a better writer to then ask the next question: how do we make this make sense? Instead of just half-assing how to get there, right?
Yes.
And I think you just kind of have to, accept that it's an 80s cartoon show. They're going to half-ass how to get there.
Yeah.
And just enjoy, RoboCop grew to skyscraper size, how that happens, that doesn't actually
doesn't
happen.
really
but,
matter. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the idea.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's full of those. I mean, it has interesting ideas. At one, I haven't watched them all. I'm not sure if I will watch any more, but like, it does have interest. I like the fact as well. It tries to introduce different relationships. I'm really confused by RoboCop and Lois's relationship. To be perfectly honest,
It's romantic.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. They go
I
on a
don't know if
date
you
in the
saw
second
this.
episode.
They go on a date. And what's even better is then RoboCop leaves to stop a crime, which
Yeah.
seems utterly improbable, right? How many times have you've been in a fancy restaurant and somebody runs in and says, they just stole my car? But this is the thing that happens in even in superhero comics all the time, right? It's like, but then the Lois goes back to the police station in her like absurdly fancy ruffled date dress, and berates RoboCop for leaving her at the date in a very cliched sort of female manner. Yeah, but just goes to show you, Frank Miller wanting that stuff to be in 3. He was not the first one who thought of this.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I was confused. I was like, because I'm going like, oh, Frank Miller, he's twisted, and I stood up like, oh no, this was on the cards. They were looking at this. This has been considered. It's kind of weird. Right, I think it's worth.
I would do that, but I would have it be really like, first. I mean, it's dangerous territory. But if you do that, right, you've got to have it be like, I think of like Paul Chadwick's Concrete, right? You've got to like have it be weird, right?
Yes.
Have it be like, I don't have a body, but that doesn't matter to me, and think of like the Alan Moore sex issue of Swamp Thing, where, they have sex by her ingesting a hallucinogen. And, I mean, it's that kind of just like, okay, sex is more than just penis and vagina, let's go weird on this. But you have to go for it. You
Yeah.
can't just have them be going on a date. You can't just have them kiss.
No. It needs. Yeah, it needs. Not sure you can explore that in a kid's. It was the 80s. I'm sure that there'd be a parents group that didn't like it probably, but at least they are trying something different. They're setting up different
Robocop
relationships.
fucks.
Yeah. Well, the thing it made there was one thing you reminded me of by saying that is he uses his data spike in this a lot. So there
Yeah.
are phallic symbols, but also like he interfaces with everything. Like that's how he drives his car. And I was like, that's really cool as an idea. Like they're actually going to have this whole thing. He uses it with a helicopter in the final episode. I mean, the doctor's like, "We need to be. Here's the manual." He said, "I shall interface with the machine directly," and he uses his data spike. I was like, "That's cool. That's they are utilizing those bits and pieces of the design of Robocop." So that was really cool. I was, good ideas.
Yeah. The data spike has always been weird to me. It's always been sort of like, oh, I guess that's sort of OCP, an OCP data transfer thing.
Yeah.
Like it works with the police computers and then it's used to kill Boddicker later, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't serve a whole lot of function. But you sort of wonder, like, did they get rid of USB ports? The standard way of transmitting data is through a giant spike.
Yeah, this is a fuck USB. This is just it rams it in. Yeah, it's I just like it as an idea that he's able to interface all this machinery. Like they're leaning into this idea of like, although they are sort of exploring this idea of man versus machine. Like they are going to go, but he's got all this cool stuff that he can do as a machine. I mean, not absurd. He's not going to start having rocket launchers and stuff come at his back. We'll get to that. But yes, I like the fact they're trying to extend it a little bit. I want to get to that final episode.
You just have to accept 80s stuff, right? Like,
Yes.
in the first episode, the gang war, there's a shopping mall that he's at, and the guy who's driving the like roadster rams, jumps off of a balcony, lands and runs over Robocop. Okay, pretty improbable, but the Dreadnoks would do that in G.I. Joe. This kind of shit would happen in Transformers all the time. I mean, this is just kind of par for the course. I did want to say about Robocop's body that they sort of sneak certain things in when he's in that rubble after being rammed by the roadster, and Lewis takes him out, and he's unconscious for a while. His arm is hanging off of his body.
Oh, yes.
I was really shocked by that. I was like, oh, that's some like body horror they didn't even get to in the movies. Like, it's really distressing to see, but it's very subtle. It's just done visually. Nobody mentions your arm is detached, dude.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's kind of like under the radar sort of body horror they got in.
But that's what I mean. It skirts that thing. Every now and then it'll sort of like just sort of touch the hem, or sort of kiss the hem of what came before by doing these little things. Because then it will also have him run over by a bulldozer, and it just flattens him into the road, and he just gets up, and so he's sort of like, okay, well,
It is very superhero-y, right? Like,
yes.
Like it has him grabbing a car and wrestling with a car and get flattened under. I mean, this is stuff you'd see in a superhero cartoon, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, this is part of the course for those 80s things. Like he is the hero, he is the superhero of this show. But I like the thing. This is something I wanted to touch on because I'm going to touch on this with the other cartoon as well. I like the intro that you get to see him as Murphy. And it sort of it shows him, introduce him as Murphy, and then and it gives that kind of almost like the Bionic Man kind of intro of like he was killed on the line of duty, and then they gave him these cybernetics and stuff. Like it's a good shorthand intro. It works. I like it as an introduction.
It has tension, right? They're like in old Detroit, like
yeah.
Well, now in fairness, he wasn't killed. He was mortally wounded.
Yes,
Because
yes. Well,
you can't say killed, right? And but you do see Boddicker. I mean, this is what I mean about like the look and feel. Like the intro is ominous. You know, things basically look right. Yes, it's kind of the superhero template. What do you expect from Marvel? But um, no, I mean, like you're like, oh, there's Boddicker
yeah,
gunning him down. It's not the same body horror kind of sadism of the original, but
yeah.
it's pretty close. It's closer than RoboCop 3, frankly.
Yes, it is. Let's talk about episode 12 though, the final one, because Bodica returns. Well, not only Bodica, the whole gang uh
Yeah.
returns, and they add the Ultra Police, which is clearly where they're like, oh, we're extending this to make it more toyetic. And I did giggle at sort of the ludicrousness of the Ultra Police, but it kind of feels very OCP. Like it's introduced, and they're like, we've invented GI Joe, and we're gonna
Yes.
run with it. Um,
No,
so
clearly, like the dictate was you've got to align yourself with the toys more, right?
mhm,
So, like by the last episode, they're like, okay, we're gonna bring this in and we're gonna sell the toys. And
yeah.
presumably, if this had continued, you would have kept some of these
Oh,
characters
it would
around.
have been RoboCop and the Ultra Police. Like they would have
Yeah,
been a part of it. Um,
but yeah, they are like generic GI Joes. Like, they
yeah,
all have like big personalities, right? That all have one trait that defines them.
yeah.
Just like GI Joe. They have the stupidest code names you could imagine. What like one is Wheels or something? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
yeah,
He rides a motorbike. And then you've got like I think one's called like Buster Jackson. He drives the tank. And then there was the leader who is flies a helicopter. Um, oh, can I say I've always found these things hilarious when they do this because they're like we're a team, but we fly different modes of transport that travel at different speeds, do different things, and have no
and never will be
real
used to intercept the same
yeah
criminal.
exactly
Like,
yeah and never used at the same time. But they're all defeated by Bodiger, who is in now some sort of like fighter jet thing. Um, However, I've got to say,
he
so
gets a
again,
Joker helicopter,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, the bodycopter, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, what I thought was interesting about this, though, it acknowledges that Clarence Bodicker killed Murphy,
Mhm.
mortally wounded, let's say Murphy, but clearly, like there was the rest of the film didn't happen.
Yes. It's sort of like RoboCop stopped halfway through. The first
Yeah,
movie stopped
yeah,
halfway through. The
yeah.
whole revenge plot. No, he was a good boy.
He just made like the first part happened. He was turned into RoboCop, and then just carried on being RoboCop. Apart from like, but he knows he's Murphy. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but I like the fact that when RoboCop sees Bodica, you know, and Bodica sort of says, he shoots at him from the helicopter and stuff, and but when RoboCop sees him, like he has like a proper sort of reaction, and it's like he falls from the helicopter and all this other stuff. Um, and they have the almost dialogue from the film. I bet
Mhm.
you don't think I'm a very nice guy, so I think you're scum. And then,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh wow, like that's kind of cool. They're going to have this thing now. They're going to show him. It gives later on. It gives him as a point of view him being shot at, and he's going to have the moment in the chair, and then he's going to stand up. And I was like, all right, cool. They're gonna again. They're skirting the hem of the movie, and I was like kind of impressed. Ignore the Ultra Police. That's stupid. But the other bits, I was kind of impressed with.
Yeah, I mean, the Ultra Police aren't the worst. I mean, they're not great characters. I don't care about them yet, but I could imagine, look, I made it through all of Mask as a kid, all of Cops,
Yeah.
COPS, you know, um, I made it through all that stuff. Those weren't great characters. RoboCop's got a team now. Okay, that's fine with me. It's kids entertainment. But and having Boddicker being a recurring villain kind of, ties to back to his origin. It's
Mm.
like a same thing Tim Burton insisted on with Batman and the Joker. It's not a bad idea. Like, oh, that's his arch enemy, you know. And he's a relatively colorful one. Yes, there's a lot more vehicles, than you would imagine, but you got to sell toys.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's kind of like I could imagine OCP doing this. I sort of, want them to have more cybernetic parts, right?
Hmm.
To sort of like reflect the kind of continuation of the Robocop program. They're little lone wolf types. They're a little rowdy for what I imagine OCP would choose. But
Yes.
yeah.
But I felt that it felt like the kind of thing that OCP would do. Like, so you're right.
Mhm.
They're there, and the costumes are all sort of very. We've seen other versions of this. I mean, the TV show you have like Commander Cash. You
Yeah.
I can imagine it being a similar kind of situation. So no, I thought it was cool. That was cool. But this whole thing with Bodica, I thought was fascinating because you are going like if you've seen the film, if you're a kid and you've like you've seen the film, you go, oh my god, like I thought he was killed in the film. Forget all that. The ending of this though is it goes on. They have fights with Bodica. They finally sort of bring him down, and they bring the gang down, and RoboCop is stood over him
Mm.
with his gun, and he has the flashback to being killed to the stuff, and it's Lois that sort of says, you can't kill him. Like, don't let him. You're a cop. I mean, this is propaganda, like 101. Like, you're a cop. You only do good things. And so then he chooses to arrest him, and says anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That bit was also okay, so he chose it. But when Lois challenges him on it after, and she says like, are you okay, Murphy? Like he kind of gets pissy with her and says,
Yeah.
like, Lois, I'm an officer of the law. I was always in control. And you're like,
Yeah,
ah,
no, no.
no, you
I just
weren't.
saw the scene a
Yeah,
moment ago.
yeah, yeah. That's it. I just saw what was in your head. No, you weren't. You were gonna kill him.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
thought that was
this is the
interesting.
sort of like routine continuity issues that, like you were saying about, like, didn't you see the RoboCop car breaking
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
jail? This is just sort of common. You kind of have to ignore that stuff in this era.
yes. But it,
But you're right. No, I mean it's but and that also kind of has it both ways, right? So like yes, he was clearly contemplating, executing somebody on the street,
yeah,
but he's able to claim no, I wasn't, and he's a hero, so what he's saying is true. You can kind of feel good about it and forget that.
yeah, and it kind of works in that sense. But it, it's an interesting sort of point that again that's skirting the sort of not so much the meanness, but there's a tone at times when you're just like, oh, this has still got the germ of that darkness is still there in the show, and I do appreciate that it's doing that. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I don't mind the animation so much. I think that you could make a little more adult version of this and it would actually be really good. Like
mm,
this is the look and feel is right. The characters are basically right. Um, I don't need the Ultra Police, but I mean, you could do a version of, RoboCop that looks right and has, just amps up the violence a little, amps up the,
Adult Swim, like if Adult Swim got hold of it and they're like, we're going to keep that
Mhm.
80s style animation, but we're going to make it like ultra violent. We're really going to keep to the tone of the film. I think that'd be really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The HBO, RoboCop
Mm,
animated show. Um, Yeah, and you could use the animation to do crazy budget stuff that you couldn't film in live action, right?
yeah.
ED, I always miss ED 209. I always
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
more ED 209. And they're sort of sidelined in RoboCop 2 and 3. I always want like just ED 209s everywhere. I want to see them fighting wars,
Mm,
abroad, fighting the Amazon War and all this stuff. Um, you could do that now.
yeah.
You could do that with animation, and
Yeah.
it would be a lot of fun.
I agree that the thing is that the Ed 209 is kind of so iconic and then is massively underused because I think obviously the animating itself is is difficult. But yeah, I'd love to see them again in sort of a in that 80s kind of fashion that growls and
Yeah.
and like at people. That's the version I want. Um, yeah. The other thing I noticed we talked about a little bit. I can't know if it was off air, but enjoying one of the films. But one of the things discussions we've talked about is the sound.
Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed is, yes, it's not Peter Weller in the voice, none of the cast are back, but they've kept there's a modulation to Robocop's voice and all those kinds of things that you'd expect. More than that, though, Robocop's foot sounds. They've kept certain sounds and stuff from the film. Um, and there's a moment when Robocop pushes open a door in one of the episodes I watched, and it has like the like the sound effect like that used in the film. I was like, oh, they again like they've gone back to the source, but they've kept some of those sound effects. But hearing that footfall was really cool. I thought that to keep that in the film was in the cartoon was cool.
Yeah, and we've commented how, especially RoboCop 3 and the live action, like, you know, how much we miss those sounds. I think
Yeah.
they could do it more in this animated show.
Mm.
But, it's amazing how much those sounds indicate the weight of RoboCop and, servos moving, and they really sell you on this idea. And without them, it's just a guy in a suit,
Yeah. Yeah. It really does contribute to that idea of it being like a robotics and all that sort of stuff. Um,
So yet another point for the animated 88.
yeah. So far on an anime, it's one of those of like I'm comparing it to big screen
Mm-hmm.
outings. I only watched the sort of the pilot for the TV series, but that was all right. There were some good bits in that. That kept some of those sounds and had some really good moments. But you're right. I would say that this is on par almost with that live action show where I'm going
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's got some tonal issues. It's a kids cartoon. It does some silly things, but it's also got these moments where I'm like, oh shit, they went for something there. That's kind of cool. So yeah, 12 episodes. I don't know. I think if I'd have saw this as a kid, I'd have been into it. I'd have enjoyed it. Like it's 88. That's about the same time as like Ninja Turtles and you know Prime sort of Real Ghostbusters and stuff. So yeah, I'd have been like I'd have been what 7. So this would have been perfect for me as a kid. So yeah, uh,
Yeah, this is sort of in those transition years, right before Batman,
yeah,
but sort of the, like Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, Transformers are kind of diminishing.
hmm
They're sort of like they're still going, but they're sort of on the way out.
yeah,
And there's this void as, Ninja Turtles are coming in and all that. And things are getting weird. And maybe this kind of missed the boat and should have been with that earlier group, that was a little more violent, a little more crazy.
mm,
Well, a little more sort of realistic, a little, But I do think the live action goes for gonzo plot ideas and just, weirdness in a way that I want this to do, especially because it could do more with it being animated. I
yes,
like the TV sequences. Um, there's one that's brilliant. I forget what episode it's in. I think maybe the second or the third, where they cut to the TV and there's a dog that they've actually animated who's like jumping up in a dress and kind of walking around on its hind legs. And they say, like, isn't that adorable? And in other news, and it's something horrible and violent, just the comedic transition. And I thought, oh, that's quite sophisticated for a, 1988 cartoon. So I always love the TV sequences. I love the dark satire stuff. I wish they did more of that in the show, but I
yeah,
love the look and feel, and I love seeing like, no, that's Anne Lewis. That's not a stranger. Even though I think the actress does a good job in the live action, um, this just I mean, Boddicker is Boddicker, right? I
mm,
mean, at least he looks the part. Even if now he's a little bit more of a Joker arch nemesis.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, they've kept some of the designs and stuff, so I think it sort of works. Yeah, it's not bad. It's an 80s cartoon. I think, this is the kind of thing. I don't know why it only ran 12 episodes. I'm assuming there's sort of reasons for that.
So perhaps we should end with the the fact that you have X-Men cartoons thanks to this existing.
Oh,
So Marvel was in the habit of licensing properties. And so it licensed RoboCop. Normally, a short season order was 13 episodes.
Yeah.
So they budgeted 13 episodes. And as they were making it, they had the idea to steal an episode of RoboCop and cut the RoboCop order from 13 to 12 and use that extra money to be the budget to make Pride of the X-Men.
Wow.
So the reason you have Pride of the X-Men, is because of RoboCop. And let's be clear, Pride of the X-Men, the X-Men animated, thing par
Yeah.
excellence, a sort of holy grail of X-Men history. That is because they got the money for RoboCop and budgeted RoboCop and trimmed it to 12 episodes.
Wow. That feels very OCP. Cut costs and do it somewhere else. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That again, there's a link there between between in animation history. Like this is a bit of a footnote, but it's still an important footnote to that animation history because that X-Men cartoon obviously becomes incredibly important. Into the early 90s and stuff. So there you go.
Yeah, it's amazing how much Marvel in this period touched, right? And
Yeah.
how essential Marvel was. I think, obviously, I don't know that this was sort of the Marvel golden age. I kind of think of that as, the Quesada years.
Mm-hmm.
But the shooter years, were a great period for Marvel.
Yeah.
And they were a great period in terms of these licensed properties. You were talking about all those comics.
Mm.
And, let's be clear, Marvel had a key role in formulating G.I. Joe and the Transformers.
Oh, yeah.
They made those properties in a lot of ways what they were and fleshed out those characters. I mean, those characters would have been shallow cop style, characters if it weren't for Marvel saying, this is what we do, give it to us. And so this is, an odd entry from that period, right? Like where they did a fascism for kids, training video
Yeah.
called RoboCop. But it is this odd footnote to this period.
I'm glad I've seen it in that sense, knowing that and sort of seeing it. Like it's good. I'm not one to go back for cartoons, as I say, but like I think knowing it's there, it's all available. I should also highlight. I watched everything that's available on YouTube, so all 12 episodes, and in pretty good quality. Like they weren't VHS quality on that; they were pretty good quality. The ones I watched, all 12 episodes readily available on YouTube, so you can go search those out.
And this first animated series, not that I know that any of this is legal, I don't think it is, but it is also on archive.org.
Okay,
in even better quality.
Yeah. So it's available online. So if you want to just give it a try, even out of just like weird curiosity, like go check it out. It's an oddity worth checking out. I think of this time.
I agree.
We are going to jump. This is a shortish episode, but we're going to be coming back in the next episode with the next installment of the animated adventures of Robocop. He comes back in the 90s with Robocop Alpha Commandos.
Comes back even better using another decade, more sophisticated technology, more sophisticated storytelling, and we finally get the animated Robocop series we always wanted.
Yeah, and because it's 90s, it's Robocop Extreme. It's yes. We'll get to it. Anyway, for now, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you very much for joining with us, for taking part, and for supporting us. We greatly appreciate it. If you have taken the time to go and watch those episodes on YouTube, you may be listening to this on YouTube. Go find them out. Let us know what you think. Did you ever see this when you were a kid? Is it sort of one of those little, did you ever think like this just existed in your sort of fever dreams at some point and no one believed you there was a Robocop cartoon? Let us know. I'm fascinated to find out. But for now, anyway, Julian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interesting little slight diversion. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we shall see you on the next episode.